Welcome to Quid Pros Quo, where creativity meets academia. Here, we're all about leveraging our love of academia to improve both your creative writing practice and ours. Whether you're honing your craft or just beginning your writing journey, we're here to share scholarly insights, inspiration, and advice that benefits us all. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to Quid Pros Quo. So this is the episode that was supposed to air at the end of the year in 2024, but we had a lot of technical difficulties and couldn't get it up. The technical difficulties carried over again into this recording where Zach's audio doesn't come through for the first couple minutes, but that's okay. I hold down the fort. Just know that Zach is here and you can't get rid of us. We're so excited to have you joining us in 2025 for Quid Pros Quo. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. That is the first stanza of William Butler Yeats' poem, The Second Coming. Today we are talking about how this idea, the falcon not being able to hear the falconer, has an effect on you and your writing. This is Quid Pros Quo. I'm Rin. And this week we are talking about Tom Dobson and Francis Gilbert's article, Becoming the Falconer, Productive Feedback for the Redrafting of Creative Writing. In this article, they explore the relationship between a writer, their super addressee, and their powerful readers. And we will get into all these terms, but this is a cool episode for me, I think, because it's so much about like feedback and how you get good feedback and how you give good feedback and how to incorporate good feedback, which is something that's super relevant to me as I finish my draft of Dawnless. And like, it's out to beta readers right now. About half of them have finished it. And I'm like, I want to be able to recognize good feedback. So this is a very timely article for me and I'm excited to get into it. It's going to be a good one. So first, let's get into the key terms of this article. And I said like the three key terms earlier. Writer is pretty self-explanatory. Someone who writes something. A super addressee is a not technically or not possibly a real person. It is, but is the ideal reader. So whoever you have in your head of who you want you to be your writing, that is your super addressee. For me, my super addressee is like the way I always put it in like my query, like fill in the box on Query Manager is I say, my writing is for teenage girls who grew up reading fairy tales and can't seem to put them down again. So, like, that's my super addressee. That's who I write to. And then powerful readers are actual people who read our writing, and then we care about their opinion to a great degree.
Yeah. Powerful readers can range from, critique group members if you're doing a critique group to share your writing. It can also encompass, agents and editors and critics. Those are all examples of powerful readers. They hold some kind of power inside of the relationship in between you as the author and them as the reader.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if we had to sum this article in one sentence, you have to learn to both be a listener and learn to give good feedback. Because as a writer and as an author, really, you are a powerful reader to like other people. Like I have like read young writers stuff, and because they know I'm like a published author, they're like, was it okay, was it good? And you have to you have to like build them up instead of tear them down. Like that's very important to me as like an author. Like at book signings when little girls come up to me and they're like, how did you write a book? And I'm like, well, it took a lot of time and patience, but it's totally something you can do if you want to do it. Like, encourage young writers, guys. It's so important.
I think that's a really important thing to mention, because one of the big ideas inside of this article is the idea of the terror of the reader, which is this, it's what happens when there is an imbalance in between the powerful reader and the author, where the author becomes afraid of what the powerful reader is going to say or do with their writing. It's funny that you bring up the example of, young writers, because when I've been judging writing contests in the past, there have been stories where I can tell that this is a young writer at the beginning of their journey, which comes with lots of fun ideas, but also it comes with stories that are not very polished. And I would say that most of the time, those are unlikely to win the day when it comes to a contest, like in a context perspective. But one of the things that I try to do as a judge is, just like you said, build them up and not inflict the terror of the reader on them. Where, I really want young authors to believe that there are people out there who want to read their stories, because that was something that was so important to me
Yeah.
becoming an author.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the whole thing, like, as you're talking about this, all I can think about is like how some people are so scared to show other people they're writing. And that is like the core of the terror of the reader, is just being scared to share your writing. Whereas at this point in my like author career, I'm pretty self-assured, and like I can recognize like when some of my stuff is like not at my best quality. But I love having people read my stuff, because I'm like, even like powerful readers, because I recognize that we're on even footing. Like, the powerful reader is powerful, but I am also powerful as a writer.
Yeah, yeah, and that really goes into the kinds of feedback that are appropriate given the context. Because when you're giving feedback, part of what is mentioned inside of Dobson and Gilbert's article is it's context dependent, and part of that context is the relationship. Where are we on the same level? Am I way above this person? Am I way below this person? Because that changes how you interact with them.
Mm-hmm. And also, I should say, when we say young writers, we're talking about in their writer life, not necessarily their actual age. Like, new writers. We're going to say young writers because that's how we wrote it in our notes. But it's important to recognize, like, you can be like in your middle or older age and just starting to write, and you are falling into the same field as these young writers. Like, we are no respecter of persons, as the saying goes. Like, everyone is equal footing in the writing community, and it is important to be a considerate feedback giver and taker.
Yeah.
So I feel like now that I'm looking back at these notes like a month plus later, I'm like, this is not well organized. So I'm going to skip to the diagram.
Well, tell us about your story. Like, tell us, because
I was going to do the story at like the end, or almost. I want to do like in the what does this mean for authors section. I'm still at this summary of the article.
Yeah, go.
So this is really awesome diagram in the article, and we will remember to link the article in the show notes, because I think we've forgotten for the last 2 episodes, and that's both of our bads. Like, oops. We'll go back and add them in probably. We'll see. We'll make a note of it on our to-do list. Zach, will you make a note of that while I talk about this?
I will make it.
Okay, perfect. So there's this really cool diagram in the article, and it's like a triangle diagram. It's 3 circles connected by arrows. And first, it's a cycle, but we're going to start with the one at the top. So first, the writer writes to their super addressee. So that's the ideal reader that like we've been talking about. So the writer writes, and then the powerful reader reads it and responds it. And that's box circle number 2, dot number 2, and then dot number 3 is the writer absorbs the powerful reader's response. And this is again why it's important to be gentle with young readers and giving feedback, is because writers are we take a lot of criticism for our writing. I was working through the Artist Way course, and I was like, what are like 10 nice things people have told you about your writing? Like, what are your 10 favorite compliments about your writing? And I could not think of 10 compliments. And I know I get comments, but like I could think of the 10 critiques so easily. And yeah. I know I get plenty of compliments, but I couldn't think of like compliments that stuck with me the way the critiques have stuck with me.
Yes. That's partially because of how our brains work, right? Because we focus on
we have like a negative bias.
Yeah.
But then the most interesting part of this diagram for me, from circle 3 back to circle 1, there's an orange arrow. The other arrows are like this light blue, and you can find this in the diagram. But it says the writer is motivated, and then they go back to writing for the super addressee. So it is so important to give motivating feedback. Like if you give so much feedback and you tear it apart, then that is probably going to ruin them for that project forever. Like, and
It definitely has the potential to, because if you don't feel motivated to go back to it, then it may just like it may not even be on the back burner. It may be like in the
it just
back
may
of the
be dead.
cupboard.
It just may be in the graveyard.
Yeah,
Graveyard of projects. And I have very personal experience with this in my first writing group. And this was like, we have so much time. I'm going to go into all the details. So this writing group was not like randomly assigned, but I was taking the Brandon Sanderson class at the university where he teaches, which not everyone knows the university. Maybe not everyone. I was at BYU taking the Brandon Sanderson class, and it's like during COVID. So this is online. And he is like, okay, organize yourselves into writing groups somehow. And I was like, here's a spreadsheet. Everyone like sign in, put in this information that in like this top bar, and I will organize everyone into writing groups. So I was in charge of making all the writers groups. I took initiative, and that was good of me. That was a good thing for me to do. And I hear that some of the last I heard some of the writers groups were still going because there was a group chat that like we were all into. By this point, I haven't actually heard for a couple of years. But anyways, the writers group that I got out of this experience, originally we called it the Grimm group because that was like the acronym of our first initials. I was the R in Grimm. And then we got up to 8 people at one point, so we didn't have like a good acronym for that. And then we changed names a couple times. So originally it was the Grimm group. And there was this really amazing writer in there, and he was a pretty young writer, but he was a really experienced reader. Like he was working on his first novel, and he only ever submitted like the first like 4 to 6 chapters to us over the year or two we met. But every time he read our work, he was like really thorough in his critiques, which was great, except for the fact he hated my writing.
Oh my gosh,
no! Like, maybe that's not fair to say. It's how it came across, because he was writing like very much like grim, dark, like Brandon Sanderson-esque fantasy, like with like a murder machine, and I was writing cute little fairy tale retellings. Side note, in this group was also one of the first times I felt discriminated against as someone who is born like as a woman. Because I told them, oh, I write fairy tale retellings, and like, oh, so you're like middle grade author. You're writing for kids.
No.
And I was like, no, I write for young and new adults.
Yeah.
Which is like no shade to middle grade writers, but they were like, I could tell that they were doing that just because they saw me as a woman.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was really demoralizing to like be in this group and be the only, because they were all men.
Right. Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you write like children's fantasy. And I was like, no. And to this day, I'm still the only one who was published. Which is like not a sign of like anything, but like.
Well, it's the same vibes as the I want SNL and you're not.
Yes, exactly. I want SNL and you're not. But anyways, this, and I'm not going to say his name. I think I may have said his name on the podcast before because I've kind of talked about him. But this person did like the really full critiques, and he had like good advice, but he never saw the vision for any of my work, and so he tore it apart every time. But because it was my first writing group, and I really liked his writing, and he had like some really solid like feedback, I didn't know how to sort through it at the time, and it like totally took. So for the past like 2 years almost, I've been querying Witch's Blood, right? Like I've talked about it on the podcast. Witch's Blood started off as like a Rapunzel retelling. It was a really like fun Rapunzel retelling where like she was in the garden and all the gardeners had like turned to stone, and she was like fairy blessed, so she was the only person not turned to stone. And it was a really cool concept, and I think it's genuinely stronger than what I have now. But now it's a different story because this person tore it apart, and I can't go back to that version unless I want to like scrap the entire thing. Because what I just remember one of his main critiques was, it's been 100 years and they haven't had any engineering advances to get the stone gardeners out of the garden. And why is it a garden and not like a military base? Because it's like the entrance to the kingdom. I'm like, this is a fairy tale. You're not getting it. You don't get it. So,
I mean, genre conventions. Genre conventions
are really important. And like, he's so right. In his world, none of that would have made sense, but it was not his world, it was my world.
Right.
And this was my first time really in an actual like critique situation where we were like giving and receiving feedback to each other. And I did not know how to like separate like my super dressy and my powerful reader and the feedback my powerful reader was giving me.
Yeah.
So like, I'm not mad at what Witch's Blood is now, but I am sad that's not what it could have been.
Right. I really like what you said about being able to split, like to distinguish in between your super addressee and your powerful reader. Because I feel like it's really easy to conflate your powerful reader as your super addressee, like in your mind, where it's like, if this person doesn't like it, then this other, like the super addressee, your ideal reader isn't going to like it either. And then nobody's going to like it. And then nobody will want to read any of your books ever again. Like, it becomes really easy to spiral from there. But if you can distinguish between, here's my ideal reader, here's this powerful reader, and they're not necessarily the same person, that can be really powerful. And that goes into being able to give good feedback, right?
Yes.
Is being able to identify, you know, I'm powerful reader, but I'm also not the super addressee inside of this situation.
Yes.
Like, in one of my groups, there's we're reading through each other's work, and one person is writing kind of middle grade YA, like government. I don't really know how to describe it besides it's like Michael Vey. It's like Michael Vey, but just with a different situation kind of dealio, where it's like teenagers and the government and, you know, whatever. And a lot of times people are like, well, this doesn't work for me, or this doesn't work for me, or whatever. And I find myself responding fairly frequently like, this is YA. Like, this is a specific brand of YA. And, you know, it may not work for you, but you're also a middle-aged man or whatever.
Yes. And that was another thing is I said earlier in the episode, my super dressy is teenage girls who can't put down the fairy tales they loved as kids.
Yeah.
He was a middle-aged man.
Wow. All right. Like, it all comes back.
Yeah. Yeah. So what does this mean for authors? Like, the stories we're telling, this paper that we've shared, and the paper is a lot of the bulk of the paper is a lot of examples of like situations like I shared, which is why our analysis of the paper didn't last super long, and I took a third of the episode to tell that sad story. But what does this mean for authors? You have to get feedback and act on it. You have to act on the feedback from the powerful reader, and I hope that you take that feedback in a productive way. You can sort through it and take it in a productive way rather than like letting it destroy your project, or change your project irreparably like it did mine. Engaging in redrafting is essential to finishing a project, and this is something that Dobson and Gilbert talk about. Like, you have to redraft if you want it to be finished to completion. Yep. So you have to get feedback if you're going to redraft it. So just remember, if you've been given power over another writer, treat it well. Help them recognize who their ideal audience is, and if you are not the ideal audience, take a step back. Humble yourself. I'm unnecessary. You're not.
And this also goes to, because you as the author, you get to pick who are going to be your powerful readers, because you know, the definition of the powerful reader is that we care about their opinion, and you know, I'm not saying that you can just like snap your fingers and say I don't care anymore. But there are choices that you can make where it's like, if I know that this person isn't going to like it, then I don't need to give it to them. Like, they don't need to, like, they don't need to be in this circle. They don't need to be the one who reads it, because there's somebody else who will love it. There's somebody else who will treasure it. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Listeners, we would love to hear from you. I want to hear what your super dressy, who your super dressy is. I want to know if you have any horror stories like mine. Comments, social media, email quidprosquo@gmail.com. You know the drill. Let us know. This has been Quid Pros Quo. Thank you so much. Tune in next week.
Quid Pros Quo is hosted by DC Winters and CK Jensen. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to contact us, you can email us at quidprosquo@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today.